When my cousin Maddie and I were in our early 20s, we went on a few camping trips around Michigan. This particular incident happened when I was 21 and Maddie was 22. It was our first time camping in Ottawa Forest, though Maddie had been there before. We usually took off on camping trips midweek because our jobs gave us random days off. It was a great way to avoid the weekend crowds, so we took advantage of it. I always let Maddie take the lead on these trips. After all, he was the Eagle Scout, not me. We parked by a picnic area and ventured into the forest from there. After about a 15-minute hike, we found a perfect spot to set up camp. A large clearing that would fit 2 tents, a portable stove, and a fire ring. The first thing we did was unpack our gear and set up our tents. Maddie was always faster than me at pitching tents. It takes him just a few minutes, while I always struggled, and it would take me over 20 minutes. At least it used to. I hadn't been camping in years by that point. Once the tents were up, we created a stone fire ring and began gathering wood. Maddie had brought fire starter and a lighter, so we kind of cheated a little, but it worked. By the time the fire was crackling, the sun was beginning to dip. Maddie was grilling steak and burgers. He was always the one who went all out with the food on these trips. And honestly, he was a fantastic cook, so I always trusted him with the meals. We had bear spray in case the food attracted a black bear, but Maddie always insisted that it was unlikely to happen. He said, "In the woods, the real danger came from people, not animals." We ate our food, cracked open some beers, and played classic rock on the speaker. If you've never been camping, you probably don't understand just how perfect the vibe is. Just being out in nature with a friend or family member, enjoying good food, cold beers, and some music while reminiscing about old times. As darkness settled in, we set up a small folding table for cards. After a few rounds of regular card games, we switched to Uno. That's when we first heard something strange. I paused the music, trying to listen more closely. From somewhere in the woods beyond our camp, we could hear a person humming and footsteps, too deliberate to be an animal. Maddie immediately told me to find the flashlight. I fumbled around for a moment, but by the time I switched it on, the sounds had faded. I asked Maddie if we should be worried. He said it was very unusual for anyone to be so deep in the forest at night, especially with a humming, and especially near a campfire. We both felt a little uneasy, but Maddie insisted we keep playing cards, only turning the music down low. Then, out of nowhere, a stick was thrown into the center of our campsite. It landed with a loud thud, and we both jumped out of our skin. It definitely hadn't fallen from a tree. It had been thrown at us. Maddie shouted something like, "Whoever's out there messing with us, get a life." Then we heard footsteps moving away, retreating into the woods. I suggested we pack up and move to another spot, but Maddie wasn't having it. He said, "Absolutely not." In the dark, we both kept our bear spray close by. It was the only self-defense we had. The noises didn't stop. We heard branches snapping in the distance, sounds that didn't seem right for an animal. Someone was out there, maybe more than one person. It was unsettling. Eventually, we knew we'd have to sleep, so we decided we'd take turns keeping watch, just in case anyone decided to try anything. Maddie volunteered for first watch. He said he'd stay up and read, so I crawled into my tent, snuggled into my sleeping bag, and tried to sleep. Waking up in the middle of the night while camping is normal. The cold air, the uncomfortable sleeping bag, and the quiet of the forest. Something is bound to wake you up. I woke up, still groggy, not quite sure what had disturbed my sleep. When I opened my eyes, I saw a head peering into my tent. It looked like Maddie, but it was too dark for me to make out his face. Thinking he was waking me up for my turn on watch, I mumbled, "Maddie, is it my turn?" I stared at the head for a moment, my grogginess slowly lifting. Then, I heard the zipper of the tent quickly close, and the figure vanished. I froze for a second, then had a sudden moment of clarity. Something wasn't right. I shot upright in my sleeping bag, heart racing. I listened carefully. I could hear footsteps walking away from my tent. "Maddie," I whispered, but there was no answer. I zipped open my tent and peered outside. The fire had burned out, and Maddie wasn't anywhere to be seen. My stomach dropped. I hurried over to Maddie's tent. It was zipped up, so I unzipped it, only to find him fast asleep. Completely unaware of anything, my heart started racing. Goosebumps crawled up my arms as the realization hit me. Someone had been in the camp, and I had just seen them. I shook Maddie awake, telling him, "Someone's here." It took him a moment to process what I was saying, but when he did, he grabbed his bear spray, still half asleep. He said he must have dozed off while reading. I told him we needed to stick together. He suggested that I sleep in his tent for the rest of the night. But to do that, I needed my sleeping bag. So we both went outside. As I grabbed my sleeping bag, I heard the humming again. That same eerie humming from before. I rushed to Maddie's side, and he whispered at me to hurry up. "You hear that too?"
For more
I
sound
asked.
effects, please like and subscribe.
He nodded. We both climbed back into his tent and zipped it up, bear spray ready at our sides. In that moment, I would have traded anything to have a bear show up, just so we could have a clear threat and feel safer. The hours dragged on slowly. I stayed awake while Maddie slept, my nerves frayed. After what felt like an eternity, I woke him up to switch places. When he woke me up, it was almost dawn, the first light of the day filtering through the trees. We didn't waste any time packing up. We needed to get out of there. By the time we finished, it was bright enough to hike back to the car. We could have driven to another campsite and stayed another night, but neither of us was interested in continuing. We were both shaken. This had been a creepy, unsettling experience, and all we wanted was to be in the safety of our homes.
For more videos, please subscribe.